They really do, though.
Let me tell you.
There's a difference in size, but they're the same.
It did not look like fun time. Okay. Counterpoint. What counterpoint literally refers to as point versus point, meaning you're writing a melodic segment that matches another melodic segment. This is different than you're singing a third above Rihanna when she's on the radio. Like, that's creating a harmony, but you're doing the same thing. It's sort of like the music's doing that. With counterpoint, it should be a good counterpoint line makes it unclear to the listener which one's the melody and which one was what is called the cantus firmus, or firm line. Okay, let's talk about that term first. Cantus firmus, when the origin of counterpoint comes from organum in the medieval period. So you have your chant line. Our good friend Hildegard of Bingen is writing these things and whatever. You take that chant and you add a line to it. The chant line became known as the firm line or the cantus firmus. Okay, so when we're talking about writing counterpoint, the given line is the cantus firmus. You are adding the counterpoint, which is the additional one.
Oh, it's that day.
Yes, it is that day.
Good luck.
Counterpoint has a lot of different concepts and a lot of different ways of teaching it. The authoritative version for 16th century counterpoint was written by a gentleman by the name of Johann Joseph Fuchs, F-U-X. If you are interested in his life and you'd like to Google him, I'd recommend using his first name as well as his last name. Don't do that. Fuchs wrote a book called Gradus et Parnassum in 1725, and it's a very strange book because he doesn't write it like a textbook. He writes it as a conversation between himself, labeled as Josephus, and, as Aloysius. And Josephus represents an imaginative reincarnation of the great composer Palestrina, who was a master of counterpoint. It's very bizarre to read because of that reason. So, in this dialogue, he questions Josephus about if he's doing things right or wrong and how to do this, and Josephus answers him. It's kind of like he's talking to his imaginary Palestrina-like friend. Whenever. Yeah, I mean, what does it say?
It says
yeah, it'd probably be a wise move to wait. We'll send you in about 5 minutes. Okay. And I'm on 27 if you want to follow along with this. So this is, strict counterpoint refers to Renaissance style counterpoint. Why do we study that now? It makes kind of learning from the beginning a little bit easier than if we just jumped in and started with, romantic style. Basically, there's a couple of different terms that we have to keep really straight. The first talks about notes, intervals being dissonant or consonant. So there is dissonant intervals, which are 2, 4, and 7. And that's because they feel the need to travel somewhere. They have pull. In counterpoint, in strict counterpoint, we try and kind of avoid those except in specific circumstances. When you start, you're not allowed to use them at all. Then there's consonants, and perfect consonants and imperfect consonants. Naturally, you might think that imperfect consonants is less desirable, but in actuality, imperfect consonants makes writing counterpoint much easier than perfect consonants. Perfect consonants refers to fifths, eighths, and the compound versions of them, specifically a 12th, which is a fifth plus an octave. And there's very specific rules on how you can approach those types of intervals. All right, I'm going to kind of wander on back here because the next thing we have to talk about is movement. And the movement is either oblique, parallel, similar, or contrary. And I'll demonstrate each one for you. So, time signatures. firmest is usually written in alto clef. So I'll do that for example. Now I'll tell you right off, this is middle C, and we'll go to E. So C to E, we'll label those just for purposes today. If I was using oblique motion, this is when one voice moves and the other doesn't. So if I have C and then C again, this would be an interval of an eighth, and this would be an interval of a sixth. Both of those are consonant intervals. And because that voice stayed the same while the other voice moved, that is considered oblique motion. Yes, no, maybe? Yes? Okay. The next one is parallel motion. And this is generally considered bad. Parallel perfect consonances are never allowed. Not in any of the species. Parallel perfect consonances are the number one thing that we need to avoid. Parallel imperfect consonants is allowable as a sometimes snack. It is not something you want to do, but if it's unavoidable, it's a reasonable conclusion. So if you went third to third or sixth to sixth, that's okay, just don't do it twice in a row. Okay. Similar motion is when both voices move in the same direction, but different intervals. So if I have this be 6, and this is similar motion. Both voices are moving up, but the cantus firmus has jumped a third, whereas the counterpoint has jumped a fifth. Now, about that, similar motion into a perfect interval is also bad. This is known as a hidden whatever number. So like in this case, I've drawn a hidden eighth. The reason that works is because this will not be in tune. It's almost impossible if both voices jump in the same direction to sing something or play something in tune. Again, you can similar motion into an imperfect consonants, but into a perfect consonant is bad. All right, lastly, we have contrary motion. And let's do this. This would be 8 to 5. Contrary motion is the most desirable of choices and is allowable. This is the only way we can approach, or this is the most typical way we approach a perfect interval. So in this case, I have a perfect fifth, and it is approached by contrary motion. And it's a really ideal situation because one voice has a leap and one voice has a step. A leap being more than a second, a step just like the very next note. Are we good in all of that terminology? It's all in your book. Now, counterpoint comes in 5 different species. In the first species, you have one note versus one note. What I'm showing you is first species. First species is relatively easy. There is no dissonance, and you have 1 against 1. In second species, we go 2 against 1. So you'll have half notes in the counterpoint versus whole notes in the cantus firmus. It creates sort of a whole separate set of challenges. Second species can be a bit of a bugaboo for a lot of people. Third species is usually 3, 4, or 6 against 1. In the route that we take, we will go 4 against 1, meaning quarter notes versus your whole note. This will be an unpleasant time in your life because, as you can imagine, the more notes that you have to draw, the more mistakes you're capable of making. Fourth species looks like second, except it's called ligature species counterpoint, and everything is offset syncopated, meaning it's like you hear the cantus firmus note, you'll hear the counterpoint. Then the counterpoint is tied, you'll hear the next cantus firmus, the next counterpoint. And there's certain rules to do that. Fourth species is actually relatively simple. Fifth species uses all of the other groupings. It starts in fourth species, then goes to second to third to second to fourth again. Very rarely does it actually use first species, but it allows the line to feel like it's accelerating through and then comes back out. And there's a separate set of rules that go. So what we're about to endeavor on, you can check your syllabus on this because I don't know the exact date, but for I think about the next 6 weeks will be in Counterpoint. And we'll come in, we'll either ear train, dictation, or sight singing, probably one of the 3 per day. And the rest of the period, you'll have kind of on your own. Now, in each species of Counterpoint, if you check your workbook, there's a couple of assignments. I think the first one is, and Katie, this is different from in the past. This is better, I think. You'll have to tell me if you like this better. It's identifying errors and analysis of Counterpoint. So it's like, I've created bad Counterpoint. You have to mark and label the errors, and we'll talk about how to do that in a few minutes. The second one, I have given you between, depending on these species, somewhere between 2 and 4 cantus spermices, and cantus spermi, I think is the technical Italian plural, and you have to write a counterpoint line. When you have a perfect counterpoint line, you pass the example. When you pass all of the examples, you and I sit down, I will walk you through the rules of the new species, and you move on to that species. Usually we have a small ceremony of this, some sort of appreciation. Perhaps we should have a Counterpoint graduation song. Okay. Some of you are going to move very quickly through certain species and not through others, and vice versa. So there could come a time in this class where someone could be on 5th species, another person could be on 3rd, another person could be on 2nd, somebody's still in 1st. It's sort of a Montessori style learning. Here's how I grade this. Before you turn in that assignment to me to get looked at, you probably should have someone else look at it and check the checklist. We'll talk about where that checklist is in a minute. Every time you turn it into me, I have to grade it and I have to have some sort of number to do it. So I take off 1 Fibonacci number of a percentage for every time I see it. And I will use a different color every time I grade it. So Fibonacci numbers work like this. I think we go 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 35. Do you see the pattern yet?
Yeah.
You're just taking the 2 previous numbers and adding together. 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5.
13 plus 1 is
I'm going to
25.
skip this one. I'm going to start here.
Oh,
So
man.
if you turn it in the first time and it's all perfect, you'll get 100. You turn it in the second time, it's all perfect, you get a 99. Third time, 98. Fourth time, 97. Fifth time, 95. Sixth time, 92. Seventh time, 87. You can see that what I'm trying to do, and the reason I do it this way, is because I understand you're probably not going to do it. It's probably not going to be magically be done the first time, especially in 2nd and 3rd species. But I'm really trying to discourage you from guessing and turning it in. Erasing a couple of things and quick swapping them out. I really want you to look at it because, as you can see, after about the 7th time, this starts to get some real teeth to it. And the kicker of it, you have to pass the example, so you have to get it into me before you can move on to the next one. So, let's talk about first species counterpoint. This would be a smart time to end your video and start a new one so that you don't have to, so if you have questions about first counterpoint, you